Hello, everyone. Good evening if you're in the UK or whatever time it is where you're joining us from. Thank you all for joining us today for this lecture by Ann Adachi-Tasch. I'm really looking forward to hearing from Anne very shortly. But I just wanted to mention a few things as an introduction beforehand from our side at Lux. So this event is part of a series we're running called Sharing Strategies, Caring for Moving Image in the Margins, which is supported by the BFI's Screen Heritage Fund that's awarding national lottery funding. The program will take place over the next few months and provide a platform for archivists, conservators, researchers, and artist filmmakers to share their community-led practices and how they often work in informal, under-resourced, or under-recognized settings. Uh, Tonight, this evening rather, Anne will be speaking, but there'll also be some time afterwards for audience questions. So as you're listening, and if you have any questions, please do feel free to just send them in at any point, and we'll gather them together and ask as many as we have time for at the end. If you're watching on Zoom, feel free just to put them in the chat or send them to the Lux profile, I guess, privately if you'd prefer. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can put those in the comments and we'll keep an eye on those as well. So the housekeeping out of the way, I'm very happy to introduce Anne. Ann Adachi-Tasch is a cultural organizer, archivally engaged fundraiser, and arts administrator working at the intersection of preservation, research, and public access. She is the founder and director of Collaborative Cataloging Japan, CCJ, an international non-profit organization dedicated to the preservation, documentation, and dissemination of post-war Japanese experimental moving image. Through collaborative partnerships with scholars, archives, artists, and cultural institutions, her work focuses on developing sustainable models for preserving underrepresented media histories and expanding access through exhibitions, screenings, publications, and digital platforms. Anne also serves as Director of Development at the Asian Arts Initiative in Philadelphia. And I'm very excited to learn a lot more about all of that work. So I will hand the floor to you, Anne.
Thank you, Sarvaj. I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you to you and also Charlotte for inviting me here. It's such an honor to be invited to be part of this conversation. And it gave us a really great incentive to review our work for the past 11 years. I'll just jump right into a slide. So yeah, we were established in 2015. And so it's been 11 years of work, and I think we are able to hopefully contribute to this discussion of ecology of preservation. I think there are unique aspects of working on Japanese experimental moving image and video works. Um, Yeah, we've over the past 11 years, we've done many projects, and I'll go through our core missions in a minute. But the type of projects we've done are collection surveys, professional exchange. We've invited archivists from New York to Japan, an archivist from Japan to the States. We've donated our preservation materials to archives and museums. We're not a brick and mortar archive, so we fundraise for preservation, but the product of that project, we need to partner with brick and mortar archives and institutions. We've also made a database, which I'll briefly show you. Publication, online essays, workshops and lectures, interviews, artist talks, and screenings and exhibitions. Yeah, and I thought I'll start by talking about briefly talking about the origin of the organization. And we'll move on to kind of the case studies of talking about the ecology that we reference. So I started working at Electronic Arts Intermix. And there I co-organized a project of looking at Japanese early video art compared to early American video art. And we also made a publication, a DVD publication of Japanese video art, early video art. And from there, I started, after the conclusion of the project, I started to wonder what is happening with the works that we presented. Um, Having worked at EAI, I was wondering if there are counterparts, similar organizations in Japan. And through, talking to colleagues, also site visits, turns out that there weren't as robust of a archive or distributor like EAI or Video Data back in the States. Um, and so I became curious about, what's going to happen with the works that we presented or other works. I believe that last month Mona Jimenez was here to present, and I don't know if some of you did catch that presentation, but we organized a project with her in Japan, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So she did a community archiving workshop in Tokyo. And in conjunction with that, she also did a panel discussion with Akira Tochigi, who is the director of the National Film Archive now. And in that discussion, Mona was explaining the genesis of alternative media archives in the States. That in the 1970s, there were independent archivists and artists that organized alternative film and media centers. And they raised alarm to the national government that independent and experimental works were part of the nation's heritage and that the physical materials face obsolescence, ephemerality, and deterioration. And in response to that activism, the National Endowment for the Arts began funneling more funding to the American Film Institute, which established the National Center for Film and Video Preservation. In Japan, such robust activism wasn't present. There were alternative archives, such as the Underground Center, started in 1973, which is now Image Forum. Kobe Planet Film Archive is still a very important archive and started in 1974 by Yoshio Yasui. Amki, which was a distributor in the 80s, and also I think started in the 80s, I guess. And now I think folded into the work of Video Center Tokyo, which is still active. But Video Gallery Scan was started by the artist Fujiko Nakaya, but it was more of a presentation gallery with holdings of their collaborators, the video artists in the 80s, but that is no longer. So there are some alternative archives, but at that point when I started this research, the National Film Center film archive wasn't collecting experimental or avant-garde film works. So mostly the feature length and documentary works. Um, Another partner, Tokyo Photographic Art Museum, was collecting, but now is more actively collecting moving image works, and they have a digital vault. So that's how we kind of started. And yeah, visiting, artist studios or archives that you see at the top is Ko Nakajima's studio back then. And, film materials were just stacked on top of each other, not many labels or organization systems. And I saw that kind of way of storing works at other artist studios as well. The one below is Kawasaki City Museum. They had a holding of films, but it wasn't in a archiving condition. And they also had a flooding issue as well. So this is the context in which I started to think through what is it that we can do and continue to talk with people who were sharing my concerns. A couple of which are now my core partners at CCJ, Go Hirasawa and Julian Ross. Go Hirasawa is a researcher in Japan. Julian Ross, also a researcher and now curator at the iFilm Institute. We met through this project at MoMA. I began working at the Museum of Modern Art in New York on a project that had to do with international modern and contemporary art, and we launched a web platform. And the first iteration was on Japan, and that's how we connected. We commissioned Go and Julian to create contents for this website. And that's how we, yeah, started talking about the actual needs of preserving moving image works. Besides the observation that Japanese works were housed with individual artists or a handful of archives, another observation we can make is that the collections are dispersed in internationally or in Japan and Western Europe and in the States because these artists in the 60s, 70s moved around via a residency that they won or just traveling and screening and doing performances. Artist networks, Fluxes is a big one. Um, and so their works entered the collections in these areas. So some of them are Filmmakers Cooperative in New York, Anthology Film Archives in New York, EAI Electronic Arts Intermix in New York, Lycone in France, Lux in the UK, etc. So besides the Japanese individuals who are working to care for works in Japan, the network could also help to expand that, the collaborators and partners. And this is where the collaborative in our title comes from, that many different kinds of people like researchers, curators, artists, and people like me who are neither of those people or can be involved in addition to collecting institutions as part of the collaborative network in order to identify and maintain the body of work we can to preserve. And and so to illustrate, so what we did or aiming to do is creating this database. And thank you to Chad Nelson, who recently revived this. This was kind of dormant and still needs work and resources, but this is a project we did a few years ago. It's a way for us to map out collections that are held in different places. So this collection, we invited a couple institutions and artists as well to participate in this project back then. And it's a way for us to see, for example, if it's a particular title, try to see what copies are out there and in what format and what condition, so that we can start to understand our priority in terms of preservation. So this is a project that needs definitely a tender, loving care, but would love to expand this. So would love to invite Lux, of course, to participate. And of course, this is a project in specific to Japanese avant-garde experimental moving image works. And I think I failed to define that earlier, but our mission focuses on works made in 1950s through 80s, roughly. So anything after falls outside of that scope. We have a different section to present that material, those works. But so that's the core focus of our project. Um, oh, going back. Wait, did you see, sorry, did you guys see this database? Maybe you didn't. I don't know. I hope you did because it was on a, anyway, I hope you saw that database. Um, but let's see, the mission, is to support preservation, documentation, and dissemination. It's kind of a three-prong approach, three mutually supporting initiatives, we think. And this is another ecology that we can kind of think through. The primary focus is the preservation, documentation. So that's kind of the starting point. And by providing access to the material that we preserve we have a digital platform, a viewing platform. I can also show you the library if we have time, which is separate from that database I was talking about. Um, and by providing access, we hope that there are further interpretation of the work or the history. So through screenings or exhibitions, research essays, and by encouraging that to have more interpretation, we hope that we raise awareness of this history to cultivate more support for preservation. So we hope that it's a cyclical, three-prong approach. And how preservation priorities emerge for us. Uh, Researchers, how important the work is historically in the context of art history or, film history or social history. And also our priorities in terms of exhibition or projects. And that is coupled with the material considerations or archival consideration of obsolescence, what material is actually molding at the moment or something like that. And then we look at that and then try to fundraise. And that's how we accomplish our preservation or determine our priorities for preservation works. Okay, so now I can start talking about some case studies, but before going there, I have a long kind of talk about this project to give you a little bit of context of kinds of works that we're doing. This is an exhibition project that we did in 2024. It was a large project. Called Japanese Moving Image Artists in the US, 1960s and 70s. It took place in Philadelphia. And let's see. Yeah, the project was pretty big. We had 7 galleries total. This you're seeing right now is Takahiko Imura and Alvin Lucia's collaborative work that I'll get into more deeply later in a little bit, and have Akiko Imura's work as well. But we had total of 7 galleries, 22 artists, 26 moving image works, and then 19 of which I realized just the other day that were either new digitizations, restorations, new subtitling, or restaging. So we presented 26 works, 19 of which were pretty newly done. So yeah, just to go through very quickly, this is Yukihisa Isabe, who's an urban architect. And a collaborative work with Jel Gyalkut, the American filmmaker. And detail of this project can be checked out on our website. So if you look at our website, you should be able to get to a summary page of this exhibition. We have a really good summary video as well. Gallery C and D, a couple of the works that we did digitize were Takehisa Kosugi's film work, which is amazing. Seiji Fujii, which documented the Taj Mahal Travelers performance. Gallery E focused on women video artists. A couple of these were newly subtitled. We did digitize Shueiko Kubota's video talk show tapes. Another look of that gallery. Another gallery. This is another work we'll talk about a little bit more in depth. Ko Nakajima's projector work. This gallery was actually about not Japanese artists making works in the States, but what happened when they came back or visited the States and made work in back in Japan. Or also artists from abroad, foreign artists coming to Japan and making work there. So we have a section on Michael Goldberg's legacy. He's a video artist who came to Japan in the 70s. He's still living in Tokyo, very much active. Somebody like Donald Ritchie was also part of this gallery. And then another little presentation we did was Takahiko Imura's Dead Movie in a little closet space. We also did outdoor presentations. This is kind of an interpretation of Yukihisa Isobe, the person I showed you with the inflated parachute work. He made a large air dome, a plastic air dome that installed at Union Square in 1970 for celebration of Earth Day. And we wanted to recreate that. But in 2024, there were issues about using plastic. So we proposed to do a wooden structure. And he agreed in the matter of, Buckminster Fuller's geodesic dome, because he was friends with Buckminster Fuller. And Yukihisa Isobe was fine with this because his focus of this project was more of a social focus, having, film screenings, concert discussions, something about ephemerality, thinking about interconnectedness and ecology, all theme of around that time for Yukihisa Isobe. We also did workshops for the youth. We partnered with a local organization called Philly Cam and invited high schoolers. I don't think there are middle schoolers, but to connect with the works from the 60s and 70s and tell us what it means. How does it look to them, and also create some expression of that. We also had a lot younger kids workshop as well. Screenings and panel discussions. We were so fortunate to have Fluxus artist Yasunao Tone come out from New York. He passed away since in last year. We had a panel discussion with Rebecca Clement of EAI, Barbara London, former curator at MoMA, and Nina Horisake Christens, who is a video art scholar. Okay, so case study, let's see. This is Shelter 9999, a work that I was showing you in Gallery A. It's a work of 3 projections, 2 film, 16mm films on either side, and then on the center is a 35mm slides. Julian Ross, the scholar who's our collective partner, wanted to present this, wanted to research into this. The image you see on the bottom right is a collection survey we did in 2016, and that's Mona Jimenez holding that laptop. And Takahiko Imura, the artist, this is his studio in Tokyo. And behind Takahiko Imura is Laurie Duke, who used to be a student at the MIAP program, the Moving Image Archiving and Preservation program at NYU. and now is working at the Gray Art Gallery at NYU. But we did a kind of quick collection survey that we can, and I think we did it in 2 days, trying to assess his holdings, where the materials, what kind of, copies there are, that kind of thing. Since that visit in 20, I don't know, 18 or so, the Tokyo Photographic Art Museum also did a collection survey, not pictured here, and also did a similar work of assessing his collection at his studio. Takahiko Imura passed away in 2022. And then we received this grant to do this exhibition project. We went back to the studio to try to find some of the materials we wanted to present. And 2023 is the image you see. That's Akiko Imura, the widow of Takahiko Imura, a writer, translator. Behind her is her brother, and next to him is Hiroko Tasaka, curator at Tokyo Photographic Art Museum. In that visit, we realized the copy of Shelter 9999 that we thought we saw in our collection survey wasn't nowhere to be found. And we also saw that it was in the Tokyo Photographic Art Museum's collection survey as well. So between that and this 2023 visit, it went missing. So we requested Akiko Imura to look for it. We requested them to look through the materials that was sent back from New York. By the way, Takahiko Imura and Akiko Imura were living in New York for since 1960s or so when they first moved. They went back and forth between New York and Tokyo over the years until they returned somewhere in the 20 teens, I think. So we thought maybe, it's mixed in the material that was sent back from New York to Tokyo. Turns out it was actually in another batch of things that moved. So there's detective work that needed to happen. We also did a research in the Alvin Lucier papers in the New York Public Library. And in there, we found the other film. So we found one film in Tokyo, I guess. Yeah, Tokyo. And then another film was in the Alvin Lucier papers in New York Public Library. And then the slides we found in the CoNG studio. So altogether, we were able to recreate what we presented. Originally, this wasn't an installation. It's an event-based piece, had several iterations. But so, yeah, this is an interesting case study because it involved so many different people, a couple different collections, and we were able to present it as hopefully close to what it was in the 60s. So I do have a little clip of what it is. Yeah, and you can hear the sound piece of Alvin Lucier as well. Alvin Lucier is a composer. So we also digitized that from the New York Public Library holding. The other case study that I have is Ko Nakajima's cylinder projector that I showed you earlier. Another piece that involved so many people, several collaborators. This was a work from 1969, suggested by scholar Nina Horisaki Christens that was in that picture of the panel. She wanted to interview Ko Nakajima when we started this research in 2022. So when we visited in 2023, she wanted to ask Ko Nakajima about this piece because really just she knew about this piece just because it was in this magazine, Bijutsu Techo. Otherwise, it hasn't been presented, it hasn't been talked about. Ko Nakajima never talked to me about it over the, many years that I've known him. So it was amazing that we found, kudos to Nina's insight in trying to look for this piece. So we did an interview with him in 2023. He described what it was, where it was presented, how it was made. And sadly, he passed away as well last year. But before his passing, we were able to recreate this. So we partnered with Video Art Center Tokyo. A man named Kentaro Taki was kind of led this process of commissioning his colleagues to make a mock-up of engineering based on the discussions with Taki-san is very close with Ko Nakajima, so worked closely to create this newer version, newer kind of outline for this. And then we were sent this instruction. We created this here in Philadelphia. Greenhouse Media is a company. They took this instructions and recreated it. And this is what we made.
That makes me want to have something in my room like that.
Yeah, so what it is a bunch of magnifying glasses around. In the center is a 16 millimeter film that's wrapped around a light, which turns 360 degrees. And that's why you see these images reflected on the walls. He used his original scrap films from the 1960s, which is amazing. And so this piece was presented in the exhibition. We donated, oh no, MoMA did acquire it. So now it's at MoMA, which is wonderful because we know that they would take great care of this piece. I think their concern is the film material because it's wrapped around a light bulb. But I'm sure they'll figure that out. So yeah, I think the collections involved were Ko Nakajima's studio. I want to credit a woman named Sako Matsu who has been working very closely with Ko Nakajima and was very integral to this process. Keio University Art Center is another institution that has worked with Ko to digitize and archive some of his paper material and photographs, vast photograph collection. Yeah, I think I mentioned everybody. Oh, and then we'll talk more. Here we go. More to it with Ko Nakajima. So history with him in terms of collection survey is this one. Again, Mona Jimenez, 2016. We visited Ko Nakajima's studio, where I think the first slide I showed you is pretty much, very much a stack of materials. And this trip, we just selected some materials to use to let us borrow it for a community archiving workshop. So this is the workshop that we conducted. We borrowed Ko Nakajima's materials to demonstrate the call. In 2018, we went back. This is Peter Alexic from MoMA. John Klaxman from Anthology Film Archive. John was working on a different project, a film-based project, but Peter was brought in for the video-based work for Ko Nakajima, and we did a collection survey and during that trip. And this is Sen Uesaki, who used to work at Keio University Art Center. We did this workflow of somebody, labeling or documenting and somebody assessing kind of very quickly, right? The condition of the work, what the format is, taking a picture of each item. So we came up with a collections catalog. Bring that. This is a little bit more about Ka, since I'm sure, I think Mona, I watched it. Mona talks about Ka last time. But yeah, this is a wonderful method of people who are not archivists learning from professionals to try to do hands-on archiving on their own for whatever collections they have. Okay, so then we did the collection survey, now preservation. And this is separate from the 2024 exhibition. This is way before 2019 or so, 2018, something like that, right after that collection survey that we did. So we identify the materials, what are the, rare materials, what are the most urgent materials, and from there, we decided to allot some of the funding to digitize. So some film video works, of course, but he also made film, a few, maybe handful, 3 or 4 film works early on in the 60s. And so that is very valuable. And we did donate those to the Museum of Modern Art. The video works, I think, partnered with KO University Art Center. So yeah, that's the preservation. And then access, right? Exhibiting. So we had a exhibition at the White Box Gallery in New York. We had a screening at EAI where Cole was there. See Cole right here visiting us. This is also screening in Philadelphia with Philly Cam. And then also we did a bunch of online screenings with the digitized materials, partnering also with KO University Art Center. Some of them are real gems. Like this rolling coconut is a demonstration documentation of whaling. Let's see, what else is there? Documentation of a wheelchair person climbing Mount Fuji. And this is a documentation of Yoko Ono's concert in 1974. So really great material that we were able to cover. Yeah, different ways of accessing CCGA viewing library. As I mentioned, it looks like this. So it's kind of like a digital archive where you can see works. We also have a monthly screening as well. The viewing library is available for institutional subscription, also for individual research purposes too. So if you're interested, please look us up. Another way, as I said, our focus is, ends in 1980s. So anything outside of that scope, outside of the Japanese moving image, experimental moving image, film and video works created in 1950s through 80s, outside of that, we kind of wrap it up in this meander series. So anything 1990s on, anything that's like thematically related or maybe methods. This is kind of a flexible way for us to present other works that are very significant and interesting. A quick look at who's involved. So editorial board, I mentioned Go Hirasawa and Julian Ross as our core collective. We also Nina Horisaki Christens and Mia Parnell also joined as of around 2024. Mia Parnell is a great partner, and she handles all the she used to handle, she recently finished, but was curating all the online screenings, and she does our marketing as well. Some of the research advisors, this is a little bit outdated, but we have scholarly advisors, we have library advisor, library science, archiving and preservation, as well as kind of the access piece database working group. So yeah, here we go. I think I ended right at 12:40, which was what I think was kind of the assignment. So here we go.
Yeah. I mean,
Handing it over to you.
thank
So
you so much, Anne. That was a really rich look at the work you do, and I think quite inspiring, particularly to see what you were saying at the beginning, which is kind of seeing this absence and actually finding a way of going like, well, there isn't a version of EAI for Japan. Let's make one, and then seeing all the work that's come from that, I think is really inspiring. Again, if people have questions, feel free to send them in. But something that I wanted to ask about was you were talking about kind of how CCJ kind of works, not necessarily as an institution, but kind of connecting different programs, different collections, artists, kind of drawing things together and making things happen. Um, and I was wondering, are there, without kind of asking you to name any specifics, but have there been, because of the fact that you're maybe not established in the traditional institutional form, has there been, have you faced kind of resistance either from artists or from kind of
hmm.
institutions when you've approached them because of the nature of that, or kind of on the positive side, what advantages has that given you when you're working with people that maybe you wouldn't have had if you were sort of less nimble and less flexible?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that now people recognize us. So I think we have some, credit behind and uh, somewhat trust us in a way. Definitely having all those advisors, board members as well, gives us that kind of boost as well. And in terms of working with the artists, Japanese artists are already very protective, of putting anything out online or having external entities come in and look at their collection. So establishing that rapport is where we start. As I said, I've been doing this since 2010 now. So some of those artists, unfortunately, who passed away, I've established really wonderful relationships with and trust. Um, and so that's how we've been able to navigate some of the obstacles that might have been there. There still are, but again, I think um, having the credibility of our collaborators really, speaks for itself. Um, not just, partners in the States, but all those folks in Japan who trust us now. If they contact, somebody, a gallery or an artist, then they're opening up to us and would at least listen to, what we can offer and what we think is needed. So yeah, I think both, right? Disadvantage and advantage of having this nimble format. Um, yeah, does that answer?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And yeah, there's a question as well. You might have seen it on the chat, but it says, I'm curious about the balance between preserving installation versus film and video works. So I don't know if you wanted to speak about that a little bit.
The installation? Um, sure, yeah, like the Shelter 9999 example. It's always and I should say that actually Julian Ross has brought it to I think two presentations already, and I think there's another one coming up in Europe that is a performance and not an installation. So true to the original format of a performance. But for this exhibition, we wanted to have accessibility. We wanted to widen that accessibility. So decided to present it as an installation. In a similar way, works that are film format and should be presented as film film screening, probably. We've presented as digital installation projectors. So it's a balance between accessibility and trying to preserve the authenticity of it. But I think we, you know, I think the accessibility is a very important prong, as I, illustrated. So, yeah, I think the best way is to try to do it both, like we're doing Shelter 9999.
Amazing. And yeah, I sort of wanted to follow up on that question actually, because I think often you hear about kind of preservation and presentation or exhibition as kind of being in conflict. The more you present something, maybe the more risk it is, or the more kind of um yeah, the more exposed it might be to damage. Um, and it feels like from what you were saying, CCJ really does want to get these works seen and shared and disseminated. So I was wondering if that, I suppose maybe because you're also doing the preservation, or if it's kind of digital, maybe it's slightly different, but do you have that kind of tension that you have to weigh up, or is it
Mhm.
something that maybe you've taken a different stance on, which is, presentation doesn't have to come at the risk of sort of less preservation, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think that slide that had that three prong, I think it's very helpful to see because we consider those aspects very separate from one another, right? Preservation and documentation is not the same as access. So present, and we do film preservation as well. It's not only digitizations to digital formats, but also film works on film medium. Um, but yeah, preserving remains in the archive world, right? And is not to be touched, um is not something that we access very easily. But then we create the access point, which is a lower, viewable format for exhibitions or for research use. And that, I believe, in the manner of what I've been taught, at EAI, to have that unadditioned free access to that work. Because if we stop that access, then nobody's going to know, this work, and it's just going to be kept in the archive for what reason. Um, so I think it's important to have those two separated, but also working in tandem with one another. And that's how I see it. That's why we're kind of that node between the archive and the access. But we don't claim to be an archive for sure. That's impossible for an organization like us, And it's great to have a reliable partner that is an institution, right? An archive like Anthology Film Archive, or who will take responsibility to. So the archivists need to be who they are. They need to protect. Yeah, and it's a difference of roles. So of course they're going to say, no, don't show that. But as long as we make the curatorial version, the access version, they can't say anything to us. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice to hear that you found that kind of way of doing both and sitting between those places and kind of harnessing
Mm.
both. Um, oh, I just had a question come in as well. Do I understand it well? CCJ doesn't really have its own physical archive space, but rather works in a nomadic way. That's
That's,
yeah, so
yep,
yeah.
that's right. Yeah, we don't hold any materials. Although I do have some materials at the moment, I need to go through and bring it to an archive. But yeah, whatever, all the works that we do, the digitizations, the digital masters, the access copies also, we try to have different recipients of our donations so that, we can do that due diligence of having different kind of locations, physical locations. Um, and of course, this is in a conversation with the artist But trying to have that collaborative, caretaking, right? So that one institution isn't burdened to put it in different locations because not everybody is like MoMA or other large, well-funded institutions. But yeah.
Um, and another question we've had says, I'm also wondering if there's a roster of artists you represent, or do you accept requests from artists and researchers to restore or digitize their work? And yeah, I guess how that connection first comes about between you and an artist.
Yeah, we don't have kind of a open call kind of system. It's all kind of talked through in the editorial board. But it is very much focused in that period. It's a very niche, and it kind of allows us to just have handful of artists, experimental moving image artists who worked in the 60s, 50s through 80s. So, and I should also say for those who are specialists that uh sure, we're not going to cover all the experimental works made in that period, but we also know that there are partner, researchers or organizations that cover a certain aspect of that. For example, um, kind of like home movies or, certain types of work that falls outside of our scope. So yeah, we kind of discuss it through the editorial board and but open to hearing if you have a particular artist or work that you feel strongly about, we definitely would love to hear from you. My email is listed on the website and also on the slide too.
And we have two more questions that I think we have time to get through both. So the first one says, how does CCJ approach working with different collections or archives in terms of handling and structuring metadata? Is that something that you handle or advise on, or is that entirely with partner archives and collections?
Yeah, so when we made that database that I showed you, the working group for the database came up with custom metadata uh, fields that we should collect just for this purpose of creating this database. So it was very much a rigorous, process of thinking through what metadata we need to collect. And so we have that template and we ask the collection, the partnering or, participating collections to map their metadata to that template. And so it could be a little bit of work, perhaps, but that's kind of the only way we can have a unified, data in that database. If that's what you're asking about. But yeah, that metadata is available if you wish to see it. But it was created by those folks that I listed, so it's very much in line with what the professionals are using, different institutions.
Amazing. And I think probably the final question that we have time for is for works preserved as film on film, are you able to work with film labs in Japan, or does the archival work happen in the US?
We've done both. So majority of the collections are in Japan. So we end up using laboratories in Japan a lot of times. But we have done work in the States as well. And that was because we actually did cost comparisons and ended up finding out that the lab in the States was cheaper. And it was a trusted lab that an archivist used. One of our partner archivists used. So we knew that that lab would do good work. So for that one, we did use the States American lab, but for the majority of the work, we end up doing it in Japan because then we don't have to, ship the valuable originals from Japan to here.
Amazing. I think that might be all we have time for, but thank you everyone for the really good questions. And thank you again, Anne, for that talk and for being so generous and sharing all those insights. I think it's, yeah, as I said, it's a really inspiring model to kind of find where these gaps are and find the structure that can do things and kind of get work, as you were saying, both preserved and also seen. So yeah, we really appreciate you joining us and sharing your thoughts. Speaking of sharing thoughts, there is also in the chat now, and I think you'll see when you leave the Zoom call, a feedback form. We'd really appreciate any feedback on the event, and also the information you give us really helps with our reporting and fundraising, so we can do more of this kind of programming in the future, hopefully. So if you do have a few minutes, it's all anonymous. We'd be really grateful. And also, please put the date in your diaries for the 2nd of September for the next lecture in the series, which will be with accessibility researcher Michael Marlett, talking about how works that treat disabled bodies are handled and kind of the considerations when they're being treated with an experimental film and moving image context. So that will be happening on the 2nd of September at the same time. So hopefully we'll see some of you there. But yeah, all that's left to say from me for today is just another very big thank you to all of you for joining us and to Anne for, yeah, delivering a really, I think, insightful, really inspiring lecture. So yeah, thank you all, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.